Some reports claim that Turkey operates 136 military bases in Iraq alone. Not soldiers. Bases. Most people can't name one. While the world watches Ukraine, Turkey is running operations in Syria, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, and Qatar simultaneously. And they're exporting more drones than everyone except the United States, on a defense budget smaller than Germany's. Stay until the end of this video, and you'll understand the mechanism behind Turkey's model, why it fights in multiple theaters at once, how it turns drones into a permanent pressure tool, and how its deployments, doctrine, and defense industry all reinforce each other. This isn't improvisation. It's a system built for a world where Turkey believes war never ends. And once you see the system, Turkey's moves start to look less chaotic and a lot more intentional. Subscribe to Nations in Minutes, and let's get started. Turkey sits on 8 borders where conflict never fully ends. So they built a doctrine of permanent forward pressure, buffer zones, continuous raids, persistent basing. And they matched it with cheap, replaceable systems and exportable drones, so operations pay for learning. We all know Turkey is a NATO member. It has the second largest army in the alliance. 355,000 active troops, American F-16S German Leopard tanks, standard stuff. You see Turkey at NATO summits and assume they operate like everyone else. They don't. Turkey didn't build its military for peace. It built it for permanent conflict. And here's the part most people miss. Turkey isn't deploying randomly. Every operation serves one of 3 objectives. First, contain Kurdish separatism, northern Syria, northern Iraq. Pressure on YPG and PKK-linked networks. Second, project influence in former Ottoman spheres, Libya, Somalia, Qatar, Azerbaijan, places where Turkey wants leverage, military, political, and economic. Third, secure energy access and strategic corridors, Eastern Mediterranean disputes, pipeline routes, maritime positioning. That's the framework. Now everything else in this video is proof. Look at a map. 8 neighbors: Syria, Iraq, Iran, Armenia, Georgia, Bulgaria, Greece, plus maritime borders with Russia and Ukraine across the Black Sea. 5 of those 8 are either active war zones, failed states, or countries Turkey has fought in the last century. Most countries deal with one serious threat. Turkey has 4 running concurrently. Greece, NATO ally on paper, competitor for Mediterranean gas rights in reality. Turkish and Greek jets play chicken over the Aegean every single week. Syria. Syria collapsed in 2011. Turkey absorbed 3.6 million refugees and got a Kurdish statelet on its southern border. Iraq has been unstable since 2003. The autonomous Kurdistan regional government sits 20 miles from Turkey's border. Iran? Shia theocracy next door to a Sunni NATO member with completely opposite regional interests. And here's what nobody mentions. Turkey doesn't experience peacetime along its borders. The PKK Kurdish insurgency started in 1984. 40 years of continuous fighting. Over 40,000 people killed inside Turkey. The PKK announced it was dissolving in May 2025. Turkish generals didn't believe it. Neither should you. The same announcement happened in 2013. Fighting resumed within 3 years. Syria's civil war started in 2011. 14 years later, it's still burning. Iraq's been a patchwork of militias and government forces since Saddam fell. Turkey rarely experiences true peacetime along its borders, so they stopped designing for peace. Something huge happened in Turkey on July 15, 2016. Military coup attempt. Fighter jets bomb the parliament building in Ankara. Tanks block the Bosphorus Bridge in Istanbul. Special forces storm the presidential compound. The coup fails in 15 hours. What happens next should have destroyed Turkey's military. President Erdogan purges 10,468 military officers in 6 months. That's 1/3 of the officer corps. Gone. 150 generals and admirals arrested or dismissed. 81% of all staff officers removed from command. Every Western analyst predicted military collapse. Turkey can't possibly function after losing this much institutional knowledge. Except 4 months later, Turkey invades Syria. August 2016. Operation Euphrates Shield. Turkish tanks roll across the border. Infantry pushes ISIS back from the frontier. Establishes a 30-kilometer buffer zone. They're still there. Then Operation Olive Branch in January 2018. Turkey takes Afrin from Kurdish YPG forces. October 2019. Operation Peace Spring. Turkey controls another strip of northeastern Syria. November 2024. Operation Dawn of Freedom. Turkey pushes deeper into Aleppo province after Syrian government forces collapse. That's 4 separate invasions of Syria. Interestingly, the purge removed officers loyal to old doctrines, replaced them with commanders who understood Turkey's real problem. You can't defend 2,816 kilometers of border with defensive positions. You have to go outside your borders and create buffer zones. That brings us to the time when Turkey asked the US to sell Predator drones. America says no in 2010. Technology transfer concerns. Export restrictions. Turkey might use them against the PKK, so Turkey simply builds its own. Bayraktar TB2. First flight 2014, full combat deployment 2016. It looks primitive compared to American drones, cruises at 130 kilometers per hour, prop-driven, no stealth features, unit cost $2 to $5 million depending on configuration. An American MQ-9 Reaper costs $28 million. All that matters because Turkey produces these drones at Bayraktar facilities outside Istanbul. The company delivered over 500 units by 2024. 34 countries operate Turkish drones. Turkey has become one of the world's top drone exporters, with TB2s in dozens of countries. Not because the TB2 is the best drone, because it is just cheap enough to lose and completely simple to operate. In 2020, Azerbaijan used Turkish drones to obliterate Armenian forces in Nagorno-Karabakh, 44 days of combat. Armenia loses 5,000 soldiers, nearly all its air defense systems, and 30% of the territory it controlled. The entire war was decided by drones that cost less than the tanks they destroyed. Libya 2020. Government of National Accord forces are collapsing against General Haftar's Russian-backed army. Turkey deploys TB2 drones. 6 months later, Haftar's offensive is reversed. Turkey turned a losing war around with 20 drones. Ukraine 2022. TB2s destroy hundreds of Russian armored vehicles in the first months of the invasion. That Bayraktar song Ukrainians sang? It wasn't ironic. The drones worked. By 2024, Bayraktar reported $1.8 billion in drone exports. The TB2 has over 1 million flight hours in combat zones. Turkey isn't building weapons for one war. They're building weapons that deploy constantly, everywhere, by anyone willing to pay. Remember the 3 objectives. Now look at how Turkey finances and sustains them. Turkey's defense budget increased 30% in 1 year, 2025 to 2026. They're spending $27.34 billion in 2026, but they're not buying American equipment at American prices. Indigenous production. TB2 drones, Altay tanks, Bayraktar Kızılelma jet drones. Every dollar stays in Turkey. Every system is designed for their specific needs. They're outfitting armies on a budget NATO countries spend on coffee. There's also the myth that Parliament will eventually pull the plug. Last year in October, Turkish Parliament approved a 3-year cross-border operations mandate. That's the longest mandate in Turkey's history, not 1 year. 3. Bipartisan support. The opposition criticized Erdogan on everything except military deployments. Because every political party in Turkey agrees on one thing: the threat never stops. Let me show you what continuous operations actually look like. Syria. Turkey controls 3 separate zones totaling roughly 8,835 square kilometers. That's about the size of Puerto Rico. Turkish troops have been there since 2016, not peacekeepers. Combat forces, artillery, mechanized infantry, sustained presence for 9 years. Northern Iraq, Turkey operates 136 military bases. Yes, most are small outposts for counter-terrorism operations against PKK positions in the mountains. Turkey controls over 2,000 square kilometers of Iraqi territory. Baghdad complains. Turkey keeps building bases. Qatar, 3,000 Turkish troops permanently stationed. Combined arms base, training facilities. This isn't temporary. Somalia, Turkey's largest overseas military facility outside the Middle East, opened 2017, trains Somali forces, still operating. Libya, Turkish air defense systems, drones, and military advisors deployed in 2020. Still there. Added up, Turkey sustains military operations in 7 countries simultaneously. The United States does this. Russia does this. China is trying. But Turkey's 2026 defense budget is $27.34 billion. That's less than South Korea, less than Germany, less than Saudi Arabia. Yet Turkey projects force across 3 continents like a superpower. That is terrifying. Turkey doesn't deploy to win and leave. They deploy to learn. Every operation in Syria teaches lessons applied in Libya. Every Libyan operation refines tactics for Iraq. Every Iraqi operation improves the next Syrian deployment. The TB2 that Azerbaijan used in 2020 was a completely different system than the one Turkey deployed in Syria in 2016. Same airframe, different software, different sensors, updated strike protocols. This is because Turkey incorporated 30,000 combat flight hours of Syrian data into the design. Western defense contractors take 10 years to field a new weapons system. Environmental studies, congressional approval, budget negotiations, competitive bidding. Turkey iterates mid-deployment. The Bayraktar TB2 drone went from concept to combat in 4 years. It's twice the size of the TB2, carries cruise missiles, 24-hour endurance, operates at 40,000 feet. First prototype flight, 2019. First combat use, Libya, 2020, 2 years. Lockheed Martin is still doing feasibility studies while Turkish drones are shooting down jets. Turkey didn't invent permanent conflict, they stopped pretending it's temporary. Western militaries design around decisive battles, shock and awe, rapid victory, withdrawal. The common assumption is, war has a beginning, middle, and end. Turkey's generals stopped believing that in 2011 when Syria collapsed. They looked at their borders and realized something. The Kurdish problem isn't solvable through negotiation. It's manageable through containment. Syria isn't rebuilding, it's fragmenting. Iraq isn't stabilizing, it's balancing. Regional instability is the permanent state. So they built a military that deploys continuously, adapts quickly, and treats withdrawal as failure. Drones because they're replaceable. Expeditionary forces because you need persistent presence. Rapid iteration because the threats evolve. Time as a weapon because conflicts last years, not months. This isn't a Turkish innovation, it's a Turkish admission. What appears improvised is actually a product of constant learning. Turkey shows a future where conflict never fully resets. The wars don't end. They pause, shift, restart. And the militaries that survive are the ones designed for continuation, not conclusion. So where does this go next? Turkey's military isn't built for one decisive war. It's built for repeatable conflict. And when you look at the map, you can see 3 paths it's preparing for. 3 branches that all lead to the same destination: permanent pressure. Picture a normal week in Turkey's neighborhood, until it isn't. It starts at the border. 1 attack, 1 convoy hit, 1 night of rockets. Within hours, Turkey is already moving. Drones in the air, artillery waking up, special units crossing lines that were red yesterday. A few days later, there's a new outpost, then a new road, then another temporary position that doesn't get removed. Not because Turkey is chasing a decisive victory, because Turkey is building depth, a buffer that becomes permanent. While everyone is watching the border, a second pressure point lights up at sea. A maritime dispute flares. A gas field becomes a headline. Fighter patrols get closer than they should. Then the signals appear. Exercises announced, ships concentrated, air patrols multiplied. Nothing explodes, yet. But the message is clear. Turkey can raise the cost, and it can do it fast. And then comes the quiet third move, the one most people miss. Somewhere else, another country panics. They need drones now. They need training now. They need a security partner that can deliver this month, not in 5 years. Turkey shows up with a package: drones, advisors, support, and access. And every deployment becomes a showroom. Every battlefield becomes a test lab. Every export becomes the budget for the next upgrade. That's the model. Border pressure, sea pressure, and export-driven expansion. 3 lanes, 1 system. Not built to end conflict, built to stay effective inside it. So if Turkey is right, and modern conflict is continuous low-intensity operations punctuated by occasional conventional battles, what does that mean for everyone else? NATO designs for Article 5, the big war, the decisive intervention. But what if the future isn't one big war? What if it's 7 small wars running simultaneously with no end date? Turkey looked at that future and built accordingly. The rest of NATO is still preparing for 1991. What do you think? If Turkey built a military for endless conflict, what happens when a country builds one designed to survive total defeat and still keep fighting? That's exactly what Russia did. If you want to see that video, click right here to watch that next. Subscribe to Nations in Minutes.